culture that raised us from birth, companions who join us to walk through each stage of childhood and youth and adulthood and age. We learn through our families how closeness and trust increase when our actions are loving and just. Yet families have also distorted their roles, mistreating their members and bruising their souls. Give, Lord, to each family in conflict and storm a sense of your wisdom and grace that transform, sharp anger to insight, which strengthens the heart and makes clear the place where rebuilding can start. Give wisdom and insight and strengthen each heart and make clear the place where rebuilding can start.
Welcome, everyone, to our second session of Finding and Building Peace in an Anxious World. I really like the lyrics to that song. In fact, I think I'm going to go back and reread them. But one of the things I liked in there was you could rename this class Finding and Building Peace in Conflict and Storm. It just seemed so many of the phrases in there are so relevant to where we are right now in the world, but also, you know, what Sue's bringing to the table is this idea of us building peace in our individual lives and internal spirit of ourselves, looking at our families today, which is going to be, I think, a very good session. And then, of course, the next 2 weeks, we start looking more outward. So very excited that we get to embark on this second session of Mission U. And so I want to just welcome you and know that we have a lot of resources that come in the emails that I want to continue to draw your attention to. And we will have more of that coming in the following weeks in those emails. So make sure you either save them someplace or print them out so that you have some of those references. So now, without further ado, I'd like to address some of our Zoom tips. Please be cognizant of your little mute button there and make sure when you're talking you have it on, and when you're not, that it is off. That's probably the biggest, most important thing. Also having that chat box open so you can see any special instructions that might be coming or a special note that might be coming specifically to you, or if you want to send one to someone else or the whole group, that chat box is a great place to be able to do that. And then if you want to participate, there are icons at the bottom where you can raise your hand, but we're also very good at watching the screen. So if you have something you want to contribute, just raise your hand like this and we'll make sure that you get an opportunity to express your thoughts. So this is recorded after we finish each time, and so you can encourage people that might not have been able to make it today to go there, or if you have people that you know that are wanting to take the course but didn't get signed up in time, they can still catch up and take the first 2 sessions and then catch up with this next week. So we have lots of ways to participate in Mission U. And so now I'll turn it back over to Belinda.
Thanks, Kathryn. We do have a compassionate listening service available. Just a note that if you ask for this service, it will be offered after the live session finishes. So Denise Logan is our Conference United Women in Faith Spiritual Growth Mission Coordinator. And we're so honored and pleased that she is willing to serve as our point of contact for this listening service. What it means is if you're having a hard time today, it could be anything. It could be you're just having a tough day, or you hear something during this session that stirs strong emotions within you, and you'd like to talk to somebody about it. A compassionate listener is someone who's available to you, who will listen in a caring and non-judgmental manner. So if you're interested in just having that opportunity to talk to somebody after the live presentation today, this afternoon, please contact Denise Logan by texting or calling her and leaving a message. Her cell phone number is listed on this PowerPoint slide. And also throughout the time of this live session together, it will be periodically put into the chat box, so you'll have access to it. And again, we thank Denise Logan for being willing to provide this service for us. Self-care is important, so we will be taking a break. We always take a break midway, but we understand if you need to have an unscheduled break, just step away from the computer and do what you need to do, and we will welcome you back when you are able to return to us. Let's go over the group covenant. 3 points here. Please respect each other's space when talking. Let people finish what they have to say without interruption. Keep all conversations in breakout rooms confidential. Ask permission to share outside the small group. And we invite you to be present in this gathering. Bring your full self. Leave your worries and anxiety behind you for now. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful study leader, the Reverend Sue DeBree. She lives in Helena, Montana. We are so grateful that she said yes when we asked if she would serve as our study leader. We had a great session last week. We know this week will be even better. It's just going to get better and better as we go from week to week. But right now, we'd like to welcome the Reverend Sue DeBree. Thank you for being our study leader.
Thank you, Belinda. It's just a real privilege and joy to be able to be with all of you. I was talking before the session about how, I grew up in the Yellowstone Conference, and I went through seminary and served Cheyenne in historic Rocky Mountain, and now we're all together. And so one of the fun things for me is seeing people that I've known from both places, and some of the rest of you have moved back and forth some too, and know folks across the lines. And I think it's wonderful that we can be building stronger bridges between all of us. And that's one of the things that I look to, that I appreciate the most about this event. Another thing I want to mention is, as you can see behind me, a big crazy quilt. That's the theme. That's the image for our event today. I have a big family, raised 6 kids who were hers, his, mine, and ours on a ranch here in Montana. And people, oftentimes call that a blended family. And I don't like the idea of the blending. That's just pushing everybody in the blender and swooshing them all together so it's all uniform, But the quilt is, all these different pieces, these different kids, and trying to embroider each one in their own special place. So we'll talk about that more later, but I wanted to just let you know that's why the image behind me today. And one of the things that this particular study has had me reviewing a lot of things that I've studied before and practiced before, but now living with family again, and I'm getting a chance to practice this stuff on my family too. So they're being my built-in guinea pigs. And I'm learning more as I go through this, and I learn from you too, not just from the books and the studies and the experience that I've had, but from right now as we go through this together. So let's begin with a word of prayer, and I invite you to pray with me as we share this. Eternal God, grant us peace in this anxious world. May we trust in you with all of our hearts, and may you bring us insight and refreshment. Help us to practice Christian acceptance of the things we cannot change, and give us the courage to take action when we are called to act. Your ways are ways of righteousness, justice, and equity. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Just a few words of overview, and Kathryn already mentioned this, how we're trying to work with this concept of finding peace in an anxious world, but realizing that even as we find it within ourselves, if there are ways that we can find to extend that peace of Christ into the way we interact within our own families, and then carry that on out beyond. We can become like a little light. The kids this morning at church saying, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine," and let that light shine through us and into this world in any way we can. So we're making sure that I'm trying to stay with here we are. We're using the Beatitudes as a framework for our work together, and we're taking 2 Beatitudes at a time, and we're using the different versions of it too as we go along. They are kind of a step-by-step leading up to being peacemakers. It helps us strengthen and be more authentic in how we do that if we live into these Beatitudes. So we're going to listen now to Susie Henry as she reads them from the good old King James that she has at home.
Good afternoon. This is Matthew 5, 1 through 12, King James Version. And seeing the multitudes, he went up to a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manners of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. May God add a blessing to this reading.
Thank you, Susie. Well, the Beatitudes are Jesus' first teachings to his followers in the Gospel of Matthew, and they give us a ladder for building the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven that we pray about when we pray the Lord's Prayer, to pray for it and to work for it. And the step-by-step process is fundamental to growing into living as citizens of that kingdom of God. Each rung is essential, and we can't jump on up to being peacemakers without going through the other steps as we go along. And it's a lifelong process. Each rung is essential. We're going to find ourselves stepping back and stepping up again, and it's going to be something that happens to us throughout our lives as followers of Jesus. But it's more than just a set of laws. It's a way of being. And that's one reason I think they are called the Beatitudes. The first rungs of the ladder that we talked about last week are planted deep in the hard places of human existence. We talk about God lifting up the lowly. So we start with the lowliest places, recognizing our poverty of spirit and our grief. And remember that old song, God's got friends in low places. Well, God with us brings blessings even into those low places and lifts us up from the dust. So these Beatitudes begin down there in the foundation of them, where they're set into the mud of existence. And this week we step up onto the third and the fourth rungs. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And blessed are they which do hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. In today's use of the English language, we kind of tend to think of meek as being a doormat, but that's not what it means in the Bible. Moses was described as being the meekest man who ever lived on earth. That's in Numbers. Moses was a fugitive of justice. He was hiding out in the hills, caring for his father-in-law's sheep when God got his attention. Now, the cries of the people who were slaves in Egypt had caught God's attention. God knew, God cared, God needed a human being to bring about their deliverance. And Moses had very many excellent excuses and reasons why he was not that human being. Please send somebody else. You know, we think about Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments and all that, but that's not the Moses of the Bible. It took a whole lot of convincing to get Moses moving. But he finally agreed to follow God's call and lean on God's strength as he delivered his people. And he learned he could trust God to lead them all. Moses was meek because he knew he couldn't do it on his own. He was meek because he knew he wasn't strong and wise or a fluent speaker. He was meek because he asked for help. God, I can't talk. I can't speak well. And God says, well, let's get your brother Aaron on board. And his sister Miriam and his father-in-law Jethro and many, many others stood with Moses and helped him to stand. Moses was not self-serving. He could have chosen to just stay with his wife's family and been a quiet shepherd up in the hills the rest of his life. But he had to set aside his plans, his ego, his security, and learn new ways to communicate. If we want to become builders of peace, we need to become meek in those same ways. Before we speak and act, we need to pray and discern God's will. Listen to the cries of pain and oppression, and even in our own families. We learn to ask for trusted help when we need it, and we know we don't always have to be the strongest and wisest one in the crowd or in our family. The meek recognize they don't have all the answers, and they are not perfect, but they are willing to honestly try to follow where God's truth and love lead day by day. Meekness means doing what we can to bring about healing, even for our enemies. And it means actively working for peace as much as it is up to us, using reason and respect instead of imposing our authority and escalating tensions. The being attitude of meekness does not claim God is on my side, but constantly asks, am I on God's side? Meekness requires patience and holds on to hope. Meekness holds us from trying to jump out ahead of God and everybody else in our striving to get to that promised land first. It restrains our impulse to want to be first. The fourth attitude of being is holding a deep yearning for things to be set right, hungering for healing and mending to be accomplished, and for justice to roll down like an ever-flowing stream. Viscerally hungering and thirsting, enough to seek ways that we can be instruments of God's peace and act thoughtfully and with compassion. I believe this yearning for things to be set right can and must take shape first within our own families. I grabbed this quote at a fundraiser for our local YWCA last fall. I will repeat what I do not repair. The Helena YWCA provides a home and healing for women and their children who are emerging from violence, substance abuse, and addiction. The women work hard at repairing their own hearts with help from trained counselors and peer support, and they learn ways to create a healthy home for their children. They have to really, really want to make things better to stick with the program. They are thirsty and hungry for a better life, for real life with their children. A mom I knew who had fought this battle for sobriety and was holding on for her children wrote these words to an old song. Amazing grace has set me free to taste, to touch, to feel. The wonder of amazing grace has made me whole and real. Whole and real. We might feel eager to jump into causes, but we make a mistake if we leapfrog over what's happening in our own families. If we take time to keep the home fires burning, the ways we learn to repair what's going on at home can be effectively carried over into our larger world. Like I said, we get to practice on them. Now, our symbol for today is a traditional crazy quilt. And crazy quilts are made up of pieces of women's lives as they salvaged bits of fabric from worn-out clothes and scraps from sewing projects. Odd-shaped bits and pieces were appliqued onto a backing, and the edges of each piece were embroidered with different patterns. No two sides are alike of a block that's in a crazy quilt. And I'm blessed with two crazy quilts made by my great-grandmother. So we're going to share just a few slides and say a few words about them. Here's the overall one that you see up behind me that was made by my actually great-great-grandmother and grandmother. And you can just see no two shapes are the same. And as we look up close, you'll see that no stitches are the same. Well, it might be like on this one, pretty close to the same, but you can go on to the next one now. And you can get a close-up look here at even when the stitches are the same, we've got different colors incorporated. We've got French knots in here and other French knots in there and little additions to practically every place. And if you look closely on this one, you can see where the basting stitches were that held the pieces together on the background. We can keep moving here. And this one I love. It's got a little image there. Somebody embroidered a couple of little people fishing. And there's a little spider web up in the corner. So there's a little sense of humor. There's a little family connection going on in that just is embraced within the quilt. Things that the family valued and enjoyed. This one was just kind of cute with these three little maids all dressed in a vintage piece of fabric there, and all of them again stitched with different kinds of stitches all around. Next one. I don't know. There we go. Okay. I love this old boot with actual little buttons on the side, almost like I don't know for sure if they're the real boot buttons or not. And then a pretty, I think it's a rose, or supposed to be a rose. Anyway, it's just a really pretty flower, and on the different shapes again, all around, different kinds of fabrics everywhere. And one more here. This is the second quilt that I have, and this was actually my grandmother's baby quilt. So it got some real hard use. Again, we've got a little spider up in the corner. I don't know what they had about spiders in my family, but I'm going to have to find that one out. But the date of the quilt and of my grandmother's birth too is an important part of that quilt. Next is this is again my grandmother's quilt, and it's got a little owl on it with a little hat on top. And I know that family really loved theater. They loved reading. They loved the arts. And so those were things that were really important to that family. And there's a little dog over here too. And there always seemed to be a dog in the family. Pets were really important in our families too. And one more. Oh, or two more. Well, this one I think is the last one that we had. As you can see, with use, and especially on a baby, things get frayed over the years. And same with our families sometimes. Some of the pieces get frayed. Some of them don't always fit the way we thought they should. And sometimes things need mending. So this can happen in our families as well as on our quilts. And I can remember getting pretty frayed sometimes. And Erma Bombeck saved my life more than once. My mom used to clip her little columns out and tuck them into the letters that she sent to me. And I just had quite a collection of them. And one of the ones that stuck with me forever, and still did actually when I was shoveling the sidewalk yesterday, goes something like to the effect that cleaning the house while the kids are still growing is like shoveling the walk while it's still snowing. I'm thinking, well, I could wait till it stops snowing a little bit more before I finish doing this job. But I was trying to raised this family of 6 kids on the Montana family ranch, holding down a full-time job at the county health department. And one day I was feeling so afraid, I was trying to keep the house halfway clean, and I asked my mom how I could do it, and she just said, lower your standards. Anyway, Erma wrote a book called Family, The Ties That Bind and Gag. And I still have it. It's still a real treasure. Erma fantasizes about changing places with Jane Goodall. So have I. Why not me, God, she pleads. I could take the isolation and silence. Why was I chosen to stay behind and take care of aggressive leftovers in the fridge and bickering children? She talks about running away from home. I did that, and I decided if I ever do it again, I will wear shoes before I take off running through the hayfield. As the book draws to its conclusion, she reflects on the most awesome, fragile, indestructible unit of feelings ever brought together under one roof: the family. For years, anthropologists have been trying to figure out what is compelling about the genes and drops of blood that bind a family together in a lifetime of commitment. For example, the widowed aunt who says to her husband's brother, "He loved you so, and just before he died, he said to make sure you got his fishing gear because you would be the only one to appreciate it. My price to you is only $300. Why did we continually test one another's patience, loyalty, and love? Could it be that that's what the survival of a family is based upon? While I was a pastor in Buffalo and KC, I took part in the Center for Pastoral Effectiveness of the Rockies. We learned so much about family dynamics, our own families of origin, the families in our congregation, and our congregations as families too, and the kinds of dynamics that happen in our families. We used a classic text called Generation to Generation by Edwin Friedman to build our understanding of family systems. And here are just a few gems today. Systems pass down from one generation to the next and can be very ingrained. Deep systems resist change. Homeostasis locks us into cycles of repetition. Families transmit values, role expectations, ways of addressing or avoiding conflict, and general attitudes towards life from generation to generation in family legacies. Some systems are healthy and productive, and some not so much. And right here, just a quick moment. Some family situations are so dangerous that a person just has to leave. And years ago in Denver, I heard former Miss America Marilyn Van de Boer tell of her survival of sexual abuse by her prominent wealthy father. Families can damage each other terribly, and sometimes we just have to get out and rebuild our lives, like those women at the YWCA. An amazing grace can set us free and help us to rebuild. But for the rest of us, able to stay and wanting to build peace within our families, we can learn and implement ways to strengthen them. To grow healthy, we learn to focus on strengths, not pick apart weaknesses. Change can happen for the better. People can grow with that deep grace, that expansive love of God. The more we let that work within our families and hearts, the more we can grow as people and as our families. Within our families, solid, respectful communication is essential. We can build our capacity for deep listening, ask what and how questions. And in doing that, that's how we find the wisdom between knowing what we can change and what we can't. We can learn to individuate and address differences of opinion and share our own understandings and still respect differing ones. We can develop healthy boundaries, engage actively, but not get enmeshed. Make time to play. Be willing to encounter more adventure and serendipity. Praying together with the upper room really strengthened my relationship with my husband when we started doing that. He made me read the scripture because I was going to seminary, and then he'd read the story, and then we'd think together about who we could pray for that showed up in the prayer focus. it just really, really strengthened our connection. As we become more aware of the sources of our anxieties, we can manage them better instead of letting anxieties manage us. Anxiety, we've been talking about that a lot, it works like a virus in the system. And here's what a virus does or doesn't do. I'm sorry, somehow just my screen disappeared and changed on me, so I got to go back to what the virus does, and I will be right with you.
Was it a virus? I don't know.
No, I don't know. Maybe I put my elbow down in the wrong place. It could happen. So back to the viruses. First of all, it doesn't learn from mistakes. It goes where it doesn't belong. For it to live, it needs a host cell. Don't be a host cell. State the anxiety, identify it, see where it's coming from, learn to find and tell your story, and we can develop our capacity to regulate our reactivity and become an authentic, non-anxious presence. Our guest presenter is going to be talking with us in more detail about a lot of that and adding her own things too. And one of the first things we did in the course was sketch out a little family tree, going about 3 generations deep in both directions. It's officially called a genogram, and we offered a playful variation of it to you, and hopefully you can see this if I hold it up. I played with it myself, and we made it on Valentine's because Valentine's Day is coming up, and it was at the end of the email you got yesterday. So if you didn't have a chance to look it up, do it still. I encourage you to print one out and fill it in for yourself. We're going back about 3 generations into our great-grandparents, if you knew them, grandparents, your immediate family, siblings if you had them, then children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren if you have them. And if you don't have both directions, just think about the young people in your life maybe that you've had an effect and have yeah, there we go. Okay. So you're the middle heart, and the lower heart's your roots. And you can be sure step parents, aunts and uncles, whoever you had in there that were influential in your family of origin. And above, go ahead and in the middle here, I put myself and my brothers, and I lost a baby sister who was only about 4 days old, but her loss was a big impact on our life. So when you put the names in, if they had a special positive influence, put a little heart next to them or a little star or something. And you can list your nieces, nephews, great nieces, great nephews, if you have them, whoever you feel has been a significant person in your life. And just go ahead and do those on your own if you haven't had a chance to do it yet. And as you do it, think about who has affected you, in what ways. Did you have a favorite aunt or uncle? How did it affect your family if your grandpa didn't return from World War II? Just really consider your own family. And we're going to be going into breakup groups now. So you'll be with a new group from what you were with last time. And we want you to take time to introduce yourself and where you're Zooming from. And then to share a little bit about 1 or 2 folks in your family tree who've been a life-giving influence for you. And if you have time, you can share a quilting story too. So enjoy your time in your breakout groups. And
This meeting is being recorded.
And I hope that we all had good chance to share a little bit in the groups. We're going to have another group before long, actually. So you'll see each other again soon. And coming up here next, we've talked about how the spiritual practices that we utilize in our lives help to strengthen us a lot in addressing anxiety and all kinds of other stuff too. We're going to listen to a presentation by Elaine Heath. It's a short video and hear about how she and her community coped with the stresses during the height of the pre-vaccine time and the COVID pandemic. And Elaine is I met her at General Conference in Dallas years ago, and she's a pretty amazing woman. She's Dean and Professor of Missional and Pastoral Theology at Duke Divinity School now, and her scholarly work integrates systemic, pastoral, spiritual theology in ways that bridge the gap between academy, church, and world. And one of the things that really struck me about her as we talk about building family was that she was very instrumental in experimenting with building a contemporary Christian community in the heart of a low-income area in Dallas, where they got an old house and they built residents that wanted to be part of it, were committing to a life of prayer and service and sharing together, kind of making an ad hoc family right there. And she practiced, still really important to her, is the hospitality of prayer and justice. Well, and that's while she was the professor of evangelism at Perkins School of Theology. So she's sharing really right from what her friends and family did to help cope with stuff during the pandemic. So it's got some very good thoughts for us. So I'm going to stop talking and let Elaine take it away.
Hi, I'm Elaine Heath. I'd like to share with you briefly 5 ways that my community and I are staying right side up, more or less, most of the time, while we're here in quarantine, just like you are. We're here in rural North Carolina at Spring Forest. The first way is through mindfulness practices and forms of prayer that help us to center down and be at peace. I recommend Amy Oden's book, Right Here, Right Now, and Ruben Habito's book, Be Still and Know, if you would like to read about mindfulness practices from a Christian perspective, things that include breath prayer and Visio Divina and those kinds of prayers. The second thing that we do that's so important to our well-being is physical work. So we live in the country and we have a small farm and a forest to take care of. So there's always plenty of physical work to do. But even work like housework, spring cleaning, things like that can help us with our levels of stress and help our bodies to be healthier, which will help us to sleep better at night. And getting enough sleep will bring down our levels of anxiety. The third thing is good theology. There's so much bad news on the TV, and there's so much bad theology floating around out there. This is the perfect time to get in touch with Julian of Norwich's book, Showings, Revelations of Divine Love. Julian was a 14th century mystic and theologian, a woman, who lived through 3 pandemics, 3 sweeps of bubonic plague that went through her country, England, during her lifetime, and wiped out half the population of England. And yet her theology is full of hope and joy and God's love. You can get it in a modern translation, and I highly recommend reading her work. The fourth thing that we find very important is play. Take a little bit of time every day to play. Even if you have a busy work schedule, you have a lot of video chat meetings for your workplace or whatever it is that's requiring your time. Play helps us to loosen up, to lighten up. It helps our digestion, and it's part of what it means to be fully human. In our case, we are playful people. We make jokes. We like to goof off, but we also play games. We even play board games online with our children who live in other states. So whether it's a simple game of Uno or a complex board game, or we go outside and shoot some hoops if you have access to that in your yard or something, play can really help. And finally, making sure that we immerse ourselves in beauty every day, some form of beauty. That can be as simple as noticing the light shining through the window on your houseplant and noticing the different shades of green, or gazing at a work of art, or creating a work of art. Some aspect of beauty will lift us up out of ourselves and connect us with God, who is transcendent. Friends, I pray that God will comfort and encourage you during these tough days, and that you will know that you are loved. I hope these suggestions that we are using might be helpful to you. God bless you, and remember, this too shall pass.
Well, it brings us back to that time 3 years ago when we first had this study, and what we were going through then, and we got through. And one of the ways, we've done that is finding ways to deepen our prayer lives and our awareness of the preciousness of life. And Kathryn is going to be putting up the resources that Elaine mentioned in the chat box, and we'll have access to those resources later too. But we're going to go into another breakout room to discuss this question now. Well, it'll be the same breakout room, same people as you were in, just a new timing. Okay. To discuss the question, what spiritual practices do you employ to center yourself, to strengthen and equip yourself for your faith journey, which includes your participation in activities to socially and spiritually transform the world? So if we think about how we're supporting ourselves spiritually, it's for our own hearts, but also to be aware of and support our activities beyond our own selves and into the families too. So enjoy your breakout room again. About your spiritual practices that you'd like to share with the rest of us, or something that was either from you or from somebody in your group that you think was really important. And Kathryn's going to note things that come up in our chat and share those. I just want to thank everybody who was part of the group, but Carolyn was talking about how she and it just kind of flowed naturally. Her study of scripture in the classes that she's taking, her fellowship with other people, and then the ways that the church, she's part of the church offering service in the community, and just that integration of those different things as spiritual practices was just really struck my heart. Mind, I don't know. Didn't struck it exactly, but one of those lightning kind of things, maybe. So if you want to share out loud, you could maybe, would it work better to put up a hand with that raise hand icon, and then we can call on you, or if you just want to put things in the chat box, we'll share it.
It's like Paula has her hand up.
So Paula, you can unmute yourself and share.
Here I go. I couldn't see it. My cat was in the way. Well, I think our group talked mostly about prayer, how prayer helps us all. Just a minute, I can't control my cat here. At night, in the morning, throughout the day, and trusting in God, knowing that He is in control, and just saying throughout the day, thy will be done, not mine. And that helps us, all of us, plus praying morning and night. Plus, I had said there's a man at our church that is teaching meditation. So I have signed up for that class, and I have 3 more to go through, but I think it'll be a great class. And he says we're going to learn how to meditate when we walk, when we lie down, when we sit in a chair, when we're standing and waiting in line. So I'm anxious to learn all that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Janine Hill in the chat said some of us in our group didn't feel at first that they had a spiritual practice, but as we talked, it was clear that we all do. It takes different forms. And another one says, from Mary Beth, says, many good resources shared and remembered. And then I noted that Gretchen shared that she takes it a day at a time, and being a good role model for her sons or grandsons and great-grandson is a way for her to contribute in a meaningful way. And Reuben Job's Guides to Prayer, Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, Lectio Divina, My Utmost for His Highest by Chambers are some resources that Mary Beth also shared.
Paul was talking about just having an attitude of gratitude, trying to be thankful all the time, remembering to give God thanks for all the different ways that God has brought new life and hope and strength to get through some hard things. We're going to need to break for our break and have 10 minutes to get away from the computer for a little while. So when we come back, we're going to have a little more exercise. You're going to need a fun guy, but we've got our Valentine's Day countdown going on now.
Welcome back, everybody. We're so glad that you came back for the second half of week 2 of the 2024 Winter Mission U study. And to get ourselves all energized, we're going to have a 1-minute dance-a-thon. Feel free to stay seated or stand up, and let's do some movements together.
Move your arms, move your legs, move your hips, move your knees. It's winter time, let's have some fun. Do the wintertime dance and freeze. Do the snowflake dance, arms up high, float them down like snowflakes falling from the sky. Do the snowflake dance, have fun with me. Do the wintertime dance and freeze. Do the icicle dance, shake and shiver, shake your body like an icicle in the cold, cold winter. Do the icicle dance, have fun with me. Do the wintertime dance and freeze. Do the ski dance, ski, ski, down the hill on the snow, side to side so free.
I forgot that we had to stop. The ski dance comes next week. The ski dance comes next week.
Okay, we'll get back to the ski dance. Belinda introduced me to this guy, Jack Hartmann, and he's just so full of joy. He's actually got a BA in child psychology, an MA in clinical psychology, worked with autistic children and a social worker with delinquent youth and all. So he's got a whole lot of depth behind him, but a whole lot of joy that comes right out. And we're going to see more of Jack. But next one up, I want to introduce you to a fantastic woman that I got to know at Luckock Park Camp, south of Livingston. And Karen has been a friend now for about 5 years, I guess. I first got to know her. She's a nationally known team builder, speaker, author, amazing human being, and a member of Billings First United Methodist Church. And when she knew we needed a new director manager for our camp, she offered her time to come up to Luckock Park Camp and be there to help us get through a really difficult time, and made a huge difference in our camp board and support and everything else as she kept working on her national projects, TED Talks and all kinds of things, at the same time that she was managing the camp and working in the kitchen. And in her new book, Quiet Leadership, she even has about a chapter in there about Luckock Park Camp. So that's kind of fun for us that are familiar with that camp too. I was going to put the picture of Luckock up behind me, and I will be when I come back again. But I got to see her in action leading a group of young people at the camp. She works with the RYLA program, which is Rotary Youth Leadership Academy. And she was presenting these programs to these kids that were just full of so much good down-to-earth communication skills. I just was spellbound. So I was listening there in the back row while she was presenting to the kids in the front. And as we talked about people that could be a really good resource for us, I just thought I'd see if she might make herself available. And she's been taking part in this session today, and she's ready to share with us now.
Oh my gosh, Sue.
That
is so beautiful. I always feel like I want to meet that person when people introduce me. I'm always like, gosh, She sounds busy. I should meet her. So thank you very much. And thank you, Belinda, for all of your help to get ready for this. I really appreciate it. So I have been privileged to listen to you guys today, and it's an interesting intersection of where our minds are. Right now, I have taken what I've learned with RYLA, as Sue mentioned, and turn that into a program that I'm using in schools. And it's so interesting to hear our kids talk about what they're really worried about in the world and what's going on in their lives. And so that you guys are talking about how to get along with families and get along with one another. It's such an interesting intersection. So I hope to give you a little, some really good insights today. Sue, you'll probably have to high five me or not high five, but, get the stand up and shake and holler when my time is up, because I love to talk about this. I also hope that you guys will ask some questions in chat, and Sue can say, hey, this is what they're asking, this is what's going on, if you have those as we go along. I'm going to introduce myself to you, telling you, Sue, that seeing Black Mountain behind you is absolutely incredible. If you guys have not been to Luckett Park, you certainly should do that. And I've been able to turn my time at Luckett Park into working with Buckhorn Camp and Grand Mesa Camp in Colorado, and also help those organizations just really get their feet under them. And it has been such an opportunity to really dig in to what Methodists do with camping and how they change the world with it. So Sue, I love seeing that picture. So you've gotten to read a little bit about quiet leadership here. I am at heart a introvert. If you have seen my Monday videos, which I'll show you how to link up to those later, you would be surprised at that, because they always start with some jumping and some clapping and some woohoo, have a happy Monday. But I'm truly an introvert. I'm a shy person inside. And when we got deep into the pandemic and I was watching how our leaders were behaving and how we were talking to our families, I honest to goodness just could not believe it. And I kept saying, what we need is some quiet leadership. What we need is some quiet leadership. And my husband, who apparently had heard it one too many times, said, well, then why don't you write the book? And so here we are. This is my 5th book, and now I'm turning this one into a book for teens who want to do something really good in the world. But I really do feel that the people in the world, as Sue mentioned earlier, who are the meek among us, actually have the most work to do and can get the work done the very most effectively if we just go out and change the world with a whisper. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of those stories today. I'm going to tell you just a teeny bit more about myself, just because I think the background is always interesting to figure out where I am today. When I was in high school, I was told by my teacher when I was a junior in high school that I was too stupid to go to college. Really not what you should tell a student, but I heard her and I listened to her, and I didn't go home and tell my parents, she says I'm too stupid to go to college, because my dad would have said, I knew it. So there was nobody in my life to dissuade me of this. So proving I'm not stupid, I ran away with a cute boy from the next town over. We got married 3 months later. We got pregnant 3 months after that. I graduated 3 months after that. And we started our life just with a bang, proving all along that I'm not stupid. Now, the beautiful thing there is that I married a man who, first off, was going to be a doctor, and second off, who had great support of me. He always has his hand behind my shoulder, between my shoulder blades, saying, you can do this, you can do more, you can do more. And I think that's what we need in our families and in our lives, is somebody saying, you can do more. So now I have taken that, spun that into this life where I'm a 5-time author. I'm a speaker, speak up to 10,000 people at once. I do collaborators in schools. I have all of this background behind me because somebody said, I believe in you. And I think that is probably one of the most important things that you can say to anybody in your congregation, in your family, in your community, is just, I believe in you. You can do this. So I'll tell you a little bit more of that story in a while. But I want to just mention a little bit about being a quiet leader. As I said, I thought of this during the pandemic. And what I realized as I really dug into everything I'd studied about leadership and everything I'd watched about leadership is that the quiet leaders are the ones who stand tall and they help others. And they do it in such a manner that others just want to join you. The very most important thing a leader can have is somebody following behind and saying, I want to do that work with you. Whether it's in a family or it's in a congregation or a community, wherever it is, you have to have somebody who says, I want to do that with you. Quiet leadership is also just quietly saying thank you to those who serve beside you and behind you, never forgetting that you can make a difference worthy of a memorial, even if you started out penniless in a log cabin. I talk about that in Quiet Leadership, how Mount Rushmore, I hope many of you have been to Mount Rushmore. That's where I grew up, under the noses of Mount Rushmore. And the silence there is so reverent and so thick and so full of this is how we should treat one another, that I just always want to collect that. Every time I'm there, I just want to stand in that silence and hear God talk to me and hear wisdom of those leaders pour into my life. So I started out at Mount Rushmore with pretty big ideals for how the world should behave. I also realized I didn't tell you the very end of my story. The cute boy that I ran off with many years ago is still my husband. We've been married 43 years. And so that's a happy story. He became a carpenter, not a doctor, when we moved to Alaska, and he fell in love with the wrong kind of hammer and saw. But, I was smart there for a moment. I was going for the doctor. His company's name is Dimensions Carpentry, which is DOC, which I have on all of his tools. So I still kind of have my doctor. So this man and some others put their hand on my shoulder and said, you can do this. When I was elected PTA president for a school at the very first PTA meeting I'd ever gone to, because I didn't know that's quite how the world worked, my father-in-law said, oh, this is going to be a terrible disaster, because I couldn't talk to more than 3 people at once. But he sent me to Toastmasters. And at Toastmasters, I stood at the podium shaking and crying. And I was a young, bad haircut, secondhand clothes. I'd never been in a boardroom before. And here I am in this boardroom holding on to the lectern. And 2 men in 3-piece suits, because it was the 80s and men still dressed in the 80s, 2 men in 3-piece suits stood up, and they both at the same time came behind me and put their hands on my back. And one of them whispered, you can do this. And he got me through that speech. And 2 weeks later, Belinda, I so appreciate you and your thumbs up. You're so helpful today. 3 weeks later, when I did the 3-minute speech, they did it again. They both put their hands on my shoulders. And one of them said, you can do this. And I just want you to think about how you could change the world if you do that for somebody. If you just stand behind them and say, you can do this. I'm gonna make sure I pull one. We have family, we have friends, we have congregants, we have community members who just need us to say, you can do this. And they'll go out and fix the world. They just need us to help them. So those 2 men whose names I don't know have led me into this life where I get to help others and those people get to help others. So your support it can just be as minor as your hand on their shoulder, is really what people are looking for. So when I think about quiet leadership and what I wanted you guys to know about it, quiet leadership is not picking up your ball and going home. It is so easy to get frustrated with the world and to stomp our feet and say, you don't understand me, you're not listening, you're not all of those things, and we just want to leave, right? And it's not yelling till you can't yell anymore. We saw that during the pandemic. We see that a lot of times in our politics now. Yelling is not getting it done. It's not giving up, and it's not coping, and it's not carping, and it's not cutting out. Quiet leadership knows all of the time that the people you're working with, the people you're trying to help, the people you love the very most are cavemen at heart. We all are run by our reptilian brain, and our reptilian brain wants things that are easy, it wants things that are safe, and it wants things that are rewarding. And so when we talk to people and when we think about making changes in the world, if we figure out how can we make it so very easy for people to come along with us that they can't say no? How can we make it feel safe? Change is scary. Change does not feel safe to people. So what can we do to make it feel safe for them to change and come along with us on the beautiful journey we're trying to take them on? Usually that is by making it rewarding. Now, part of my story you might have seen in the slide was that I was a car salesperson. I wanted to figure out the very easiest way to make a lot of money, but also have a lot of growth in my life. What could be the hardest thing I could do and get a lot of growth? Car sales in Alaska was it. When men would question me about an engine, I really didn't know what it was talking about, or if they would dicker and fight over the price of the car, and I didn't really want to dicker or argue, I would just pull out my little bucket of lollipops and give them a lollipop, and they would sit there and suck on their lollipop. It was easy, it was safe, and it was rewarding, and they would buy the car every time. So people are looking for that. How can you easily help them to see the wisdom that you're sharing? How can you make it safe, and how can you make it rewarding? There are lots of ways to do that. So quiet leadership is about building something together. When you are a quiet leader in an anxious world, you need to draw others in with you and say, this is where we're going, and this is what I think it looks like. I want your opinion. I want your opinion. I want your opinion. Quiet leadership is often quiet. It's very consistent. You have to decide where you're going, and you have to continue to move that direction. Sometimes you have to reevaluate and say, oh, I'm a little bit wrong here, but it is very consistent. We're always moving forward. It is a collaboration. I believe so much in collaboration. The art behind me is all collaborative art. That's what my company does. We have strangers, we have families, all stand together in front of a canvas. It's about the size of couch art is how I usually call it, and they create art together. So don't they do a good job? It's incredible. That's how we change the world, and that's how we change relationships, is with collaboration. Quiet leadership is also pragmatic. It is beautiful, and it is attainable. Quiet leadership is knowing that when you're in a situation that you're not happy with, you can decide to just cope with it. You can decide to carp about it. You can cut out, or you can communicate. But if you remember all the time that people are looking for easy, they're looking for safe, and they're looking for rewarding, coping is not usually the best choice. Once in a while it is. You just have to cope with the situation because that's what it is. Harping, when all you do is complain about the situation and that becomes the culture in your house or in your office, just spirals you down and hurts your heart every single day. Cutting out is okay if you cannot make changes where you are, but cutting out of a relationship that you really could make better if you just communicated is usually the better thing to do. So my grandmother taught me the very first lesson in quiet leadership. And when you know that you're trying to get along with your family, you're trying to get along with your friends, but you're also trying to make big changes in the world, you have to know that some people are like blisters. I was really frustrated with my brothers. They weren't working as hard as I was on the picking potatoes. And I think my grandma probably saw that in order to show I was working harder than the boys, I threw some dirt on my face and kind of rubbed it in so she'd know that I was working really hard. I think she saw right through that. But when I said, they're not working as hard as I am, she said, oh, honey, some people are like blisters. They only show up after all the work is done. Oh, right. It's such a truth. We are busy moving along, trying to make changes, and our people aren't changing with us, or they're not standing beside us when we want them to. And that's because they're blisters. And here's the next thing Grandma said. She said, you can never, ever pop a blister. It causes so much pain and it ruins your reputation. So don't pop the blisters in your life. Just know that that's what they are. They're just a blister. I'm going to let them show up when they show up, and I'm not going to expect anything different from them. But if you're a little bit frustrated with them and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm trying to move forward, you're going to have to remember that you've got what you expect. This is probably the first lesson that I really learned. I was on the road training business women all across the nation, and I would go into cities all over, truly, and people would say, but it's different here. And it was not different anywhere except Portland. In Portland, it was different. But every place else, people were exactly the same all of the time. And I was teaching a lot at conferences, which I know you guys have attended a lot of church conferences. And at dinner, there would always be chicken. Chicken would come out, and there'd be somebody who'd go, chicken, I just knew it. And I, or some of you, that person, that chicken, right? But I realized that it was the people who were like, oh my God, it's chicken. Look, we're having chicken for dinner. Were the ones who got the more out of life. They're the ones who got the more out of, or got more out of the event. And they were the ones who were just having fun. So I realized that if you look for the light in the world, if you look for the very best in humans, you're going to find it. When my dear, not a doctor husband and I drive down the road, he sees so many bad drivers. If you've been in front of him, he's yelled at you. He just sees bad drivers everywhere we go. Oh my gosh, I never see a bad driver. Out there looking for people who are doing their very best, looking for people who are just trying to move forward. Maybe they forgot the directions and they have to take a late turn and they forgot to turn their turn signal on. It is okay. I love driving. He does not love driving because I'm looking for the very best in the world. So I want you all to pop into chat, and you're going to do a little thing here with me. If you want to go through life saying chicken in chat, I want you to write chicken in small letters. But if you are a chicken, I want you to write chicken in great big capital letters and scream it out and raise your hands just a little bit. So are you chicken? And we need you guys. It's okay. You keep us safe. Or are you chicken? What are you? We want to see this in chat. Show us what you are. And now I'm trying to see chat. It's not, there we go. Oh my gosh, chicken woo woo. Guys, I love it. Look at all those chickens. This is fabulous. Oh, Belinda's got her hands up. Okay, very good. We're a bunch of chicken people here. That is excellent. That's how we change the world. Look for the best in the world. Kathryn. Kathryn's got a little chicken dance going on. That is good. We need chicken dance music right there. So what I realized, I'm looking for the light in the world, but not everybody else is. I also got just a little bit full of myself. My head was about this big around. The first time I ever did a speech to a really big group, well, it was 1,500 people, but at that time it was unbelievably huge. I couldn't believe it. They said, you have to be behind the podium. I'm like, oh, Karen Grosz, don't talk behind the podium. I was so full of myself. I'm like, I have to move around. I have to be with people. And they're like, nope, there's no more lavaliers. You're behind the podium. Well, I did my speech. The people laughed, they clapped, they did all of the things. And when I walked down off the stage, my head was this big. I could barely carry it. And I sat down and I fluffed and did all the things. And I looked down and my pants were completely unzipped. If I had not been behind that podium, I would have been so embarrassed. But that was God reminding me, oh, honey, you're not all that. Just remember that pride is a sin. So I'm on the phone one day and I'm coaching somebody who had to earn her time with me. Now, that's kind of a bad idea for somebody whose head could get a little bit big. And I was telling her how to run her business and what she needed to do and how everything would be better. And when I got off the phone, I threw it down and I said, she's not going to do anything I said. And my dad said, Karen, people don't listen unless they ask to be told. Now, I want you to think of every time you've been in a conversation with your family and you know the answer, you know the right way to do something, and you're trying to tell them and they have their fingers in their ears. It's because you just started talking. And if you ask 3 questions, what are you thinking? How do you see this going? What's the future look like? How do you feel about this? You're going to get completely different responses. Now, I will tell you that you should never lead a question, especially with a child or a spouse, by saying, what the hell were you thinking? That's not a good question. Don't use that one. But if you ask 3 questions before you start to pontificate, they will listen. So the person I was talking to, I realized how wrong I had been. And I called back and humbled myself and said, Carol, I realized I didn't do a good job on that call. We have to admit our wrongs, right? Don't we have to do that sometimes? I said, I didn't do a good job on that call. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? What were you hoping I could help you with? What are your goals? What's something that you're worried about right now? Holy cow, it changed everything. So she started telling me those things. And guess what I told her on that call? Everything I'd said in the first call, but she actually was listening. We had a conversation and she wrote it down. And to this day, I still coach Carol, but I always lead our coaching calls with questions. 3 questions before you make a statement. It's going to change every single relationship that you're in. So this next story that I want to tell you about, first I have to have a little sip of water here. Are any of you scuba divers? Anybody a scuba diver? But I don't get it. Everybody in my family is scuba divers. This is my husband and my grandson somewhere in the Caribbean or somewhere, I don't know. And they like swimming in fish poop. It does not interest me. I don't want anything to do with it. But I love to go out on the dive trips. So when we go on a dive trip as a family, I always pay as if I'm a diver, which means they go under the water. I sit on the boat with the deckhands and the captain, and it's not a bad situation at all. It's peaceful. We're in the middle of the ocean, and I have an hour to myself. But what I started doing was watching those dive masters. And when they would get on the boat, they would look at each person and they would say, "How are you today, Sue? How are you today, Belinda? How are you, Kathryn? Michelle, how are you today?" And they would look them in the eye. And I realized that they were looking them in the eye because their life depended on it. If one of you said, I'm fine, I think I'll be okay, they knew they had to pay a little bit more attention to you. If you're like my husband, "Hey, I'm great, I got it all control," they also knew they had to pay attention to you because you would just drift off on your own under the water where nobody knew where you were. So these dive masters are asking people the question, "How are you today?" as if their very life depended on it, because it does. So I told you that I've been doing a lot of work in schools. And as Sue mentioned, I've done a lot of work up at Luffolk Park. And one of the things that surprises me to no end is how often the children in our family get up in the morning and they get themselves breakfast and they get themselves off to school and they spend all day at school and they come home and they get themselves dinner and they put themselves to bed. There's no family dinner. There's nobody saying, "How are you today?" as if their life depended on it. And that is what our children are missing. So when I'm in the schools, we do something with kids called leadership solutions. And in the leadership solution, we take the big problem, and they usually want to deal with suicide, mental health, violence. And we take that and we work it backwards to the very smallest. What's the smallest thing that you could do to have an impact on the students around you? And almost every time the kids decide to do something where they see one another, where they talk to one another every day, where they have a buddy bench where they can check in, something so that they can say to people, "How are you?" Now, as I jumped on this call earlier today, I thought, oh my gosh, these are my people. We have gray hair, we have wrinkles, we have grandchildren. It is our job to call our grandchildren. So I call mine every day, but call your grandchildren and say, "How are you today?" as if their life depended on it. And if they've got a friend and nobody's doing that for them, call their friend too and say, "How are you today?" And they will tell you. The first couple times it's going to be fine. But if you really talk to them, if you really give them space, they will they'll listen to you and they'll talk to you and they'll tell you what's going on. So my grandson and his friends, I always tell my grandson, "Well, here comes a grandma lecture about whatever the topic is, manners or whatever." And then when they all got into high school, I said, "Well, now you guys are older, you're earning some money, I have to start charging for these seminars because I'm a very expensive coach." And they all laugh at that. They're like, "Oh, can we have a seminar today?" And not too long ago, they actually all pitched in some money and said, "We want a whole afternoon of seminars." Now that is pretty interesting for a bunch of freshmen in high school and want to listen to a grandma, right? But the reason they want to do that is because I've been listening to them. And if you're frustrated with your family, you're frustrated with the anxiety going on in the world, it's because we just haven't stopped and listened. People want to talk. And we're the ones they want to talk to because we're softer and gentler and we know things. And so just take a moment and say, How are you? As if their life depended on it. So a woman who did this for me was named Helen. And I always say Helen was my little old lady who lived next door to us. I realize now she was probably younger than I am, but she lived next door to us. We had 5 kids in a trailer house, and our trailer house was noise and chaos, and it didn't have enough seats. When we were watching Lawrence Welk and Disney, The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night, if you got up, you would scream, please back. And because they're just, you know, if you had a good spot, you had a good spot and you wanted it back. So our house was noisy and it was chaotic, and it was not always the happiest place in the world. I'm not going to say that it was horrible, because it wasn't, but it just was too much. But Helen lived in a little tiny house that was absolutely neat as a pin. She cut her own wood to put in the wood stove that she cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner on. She had a hand pump in the kitchen. We had running water. Everybody in town had running water, but Helen still had a hand pump. She did her laundry in an old Wringer washing machine once a week. On Tuesday, it was laundry day, and there just was a system to her life, and it was so quiet in her house. And when I would go to Helen's house, I would get to sit on the wood box, and she would sit in the little red seat, just like this one here, and she would talk to me and listen to me. Now, if you had a really good day, you got to sit in the red seat, which that was usually where her grandson Andy got to sit. And Andy became a CEO of one of the power companies in South Dakota, and is happily retired now. He's just a wonderful man. But if you got to sit in that seat, it was all about you that day. And what I learned as I look back at what Helen taught me and what Helen showed me, it's that if you change your seats, you get to change your perspective. And so often I find that we're not doing that in the world. When I work with a board of directors, when I work with a team, I always make them change seats. We sit in completely different chairs than we ever sat in. In my house, there is no assigned seating. You know how it's so easy to fall into somebody sits here, somebody sits here, somebody sits here. We don't do that. You sit in a different place at every meal. We also sleep in different bedrooms. All of the time. We just move around, we change things up. I also move where the garbage can is in the bathroom, because I want you to have to think. We don't want to be those old people that can't remember anything. Because if you never change your seat, and you never change how you drive to work, and you never change what you're wearing, your perspective gets stuck, right? And you think that you know everything and the rest of the world doesn't know anything, which is probably not quite true. So you have to change your seat and change your perspective. And when you do that, you get a whole different kind of clarity in your life. So not too long ago, I took part in a poverty simulator. I am a very big philanthropist, giving to people. I'm not all about planned giving. I'm all about neighbor to neighbor giving. And so my friends know at Christmas, I'm going to put out a request that says, hey, I've adopted this family. What can we do for them? And I'm able to give those families, well, this year it was almost $10,000 I gave to a family, all because my friends just handed me $100 bills and said, go help this family. This year, as I stood there and gave this man this money, I first gave him an envelope. It had $300 in $20 bills. And when he opened it, he started crying. And he said, oh my gosh, we can buy dinner. We can have food this week. And then I handed him an envelope with $2,000 in it. And I said, this is $2,000. And he cried even harder. And he said, I can get my family a home. We were standing outside of a hotel. It smelled like pot and dust, and it was very gross. And there were people watching us. I was a little bit nervous. It's not the kind of place that I like to stand, because my life is different than that, right? But as I stood there and smelled those smells and watched him shaking, I realized how close we all are to that moment, and how I needed to look at the world from his seat. And I handed him another envelope, and he said, are you like some kind of church lady? And I said, oh, it's Dawn. I'm not a church lady. I said, I am a church lady, but this isn't church people. And I told him that it was, just me and my friends, and we were going to help him find a new job. We were going to help him learn how to drive. We had all kinds of things that we were gifting to this man. When I gave him the final envelope with a lot of $100 bills in it, he said, first off, he gave me a great big bear hug. He's way taller than I was. He leans down, gives me a great big bear hug. I had to go to the chiropractor afterwards because he was so touched. But he said, who can I help? Who can I give some of this to? Because I changed his seat, right? He no longer was the needy one. He was one with something to give. But to change our seats, and we have different conversations and we have different feelings. So if you've been having the same conversation over and over with somebody, it could be a dead cat. You have to read my book, What's Next, to talk about dead cats. Dead cats are those that carry around, show everybody, oh, look, I have a bunion. They don't want to hear it anymore. But more often, we just need to change seats so they can see it from our side of the room, from our side of the street. Take people to a different spot and have that conversation with them. It's going to change everything. And when you do that, remember that they just want it to be easy, they want it to feel safe, and they want it to be rewarding. I'm just going to take a breath here. I've just been whomping you guys with stuff. Does anybody have a question? Anything you want to put in chat, have me clarify? Sue, I'll have you just take a look there real quick. Oh, yes, it does work for grandpas too. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Grandpas can say anything and they're like, oh my gosh, it's the rules. Anybody have a question? I like this. Snorkeling, you'll see more than you'll see diving. I love that friend. I also don't want to snorkel. All right. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to tell you a couple more things here, and I appreciate it. But if you guys, if you come or another comment, put those in there. So I grew up in Custer, South Dakota, which again, close to Mount Rushmore. And I grew up in Wallaco. And when people would come to our town, they would be like, oh, it's the wild, wild west. And they were having their wild west experience. And they loved it. They saw cowboys and if they saw cows and all those things were so incredibly exciting for people. Well, this gal was named Mary Two Eagles, and Mary Two Eagles was a white woman who married an Indian man, and they lived in our town. It was okay. Everybody loved them, took care of them, but Mary loved hamburger. If you were cooking hamburger and she smelled it when she was walking by, she would just open the door, come in and sit down and have dinner with your family, and we all just let her. When her husband died, she looked around their little cabin and she realized she did not have a lot of hope. Didn't have a safety net of any kind. She didn't have money. She didn't have a job. But she had a horse, and she had an Indian headdress that belonged to her husband, Charlie, and she had a Chihuahua. And so Mary put on the headdress, and she grabbed the Chihuahua, and she rode into town, and she sat on the corner, and tourists were like, oh my gosh, it's the Wild Wild West, would see her, and they'd be, oh my gosh, it's an Indian, and they would take her picture. Now, Mary was a little tiny. She was bent over with a big old hump on her back. And she was tiny. And she's really quiet. She was very stoic while she sat there. She played the role of the Indian chief to the nth degree. If you gave her money, she would say thank you or nod her head. But if you didn't give her money, she would slide off that horse, chase you down the street until you were throwing money out of your pocket just to get her to stop whooping at you. So one day my mom was driving along in a car with no car seats. Some of you remember those, no buckle, no seat belts, no car seats. It was, in the good old days. And we're climbing back and forth over the front seat, over the back. And mom swings to the side of the road and she picks up a hitchhiker, Mary Two Eagles. Well, in the 70s, you did not pick up hitchhikers. It was kind of a bad idea. But here it was Mary, and she gets in the car, and Mary and my mom are just talking away, and how are you doing, and where are you going, and what's going on? And Mary tells my mom where she needs dropped off in Rapid City. And then Mary gets up on her knees, and she leans over the back seat, and she says, hey, do you kids want to learn how to hitchhike? And what do you think we said? Like, yes. And my mom's, no hitchhiking. So Mary says, here's what you have to know about hitchhiking. You hitchhike with your left thumb. You put your pack on your back, you get on the side of the road, and you walk with traffic with your left thumb out. And that shows people that you know where you're going and you're going to get there. She said, if instead you turn around and you look at the cars and you have your right thumb out, nobody's going to pick you up because you're showing no initiative to get where you're going. Holy cow. Many, many years later, I was teaching women how to set goals. And I realized that the people who set goals and told them to others who were brave enough to say, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do, they were the ones who achieved goals. You put your left thumb out and you say, this is what I'm trying to do for the world. This is what I'm trying to do for the family. This is what I'm trying to do for the community. And people will help you get there. I can be in a room of 3,000 people and there'll be somebody on the far side who will say, I know somebody who can help you. I know somebody who does that. Let me join you. So I'd love a couple of you who are brave participants to just pop into chat. Again, I love chat. Pop into chat and tell me a goal that you have. And somebody in the room might say, I can help with that. So what's a goal? What's something you're trying to achieve right now? Might be to lose 5 pounds, might be to change the world. What's your goal? Be brave and stick your left thumb out. Tell us what you're trying to do. I'll take a breath and a drink of water while you do that. Oh, I have ideas for that, Belinda. Oh my gosh, these are so amazing. We'll make art every day. Do it, do it, do it, do it. Even if it's just 5 minutes, to spend 5 minutes on that. I love this. So the first thing I'm going to say, how to get more men involved in mission youth studies. I want to just make sure you're inviting them. The other thing is give them a job when they get here. Those things often help you. If you've done those, I don't know what else to tell you. No, I think really just invite them. Social media skills. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Don't be scared of it. I'll give you the link to sign up for my Monday videos so you can watch them or just follow me on Facebook. Social media is where it's at. And I put out these silly Monday videos trying to talk to the people that need love in the world. And no one has ever said, shut up, we don't like it. So figure it out. It's not that hard. Just start posting stuff. Grants. I can't help you write them, but I will tell you there is so much money out there in grants. You can change the world with that. Fundraising to keep church in our community. I love that. Make a difference in our church. So look at all of these beautiful, beautiful things. How to break out of the old habits of communication. Yeah, Mary Beth, I think that's such a big one. And that is sit in a different seat, go to a different place to have that conversation, ask different questions. There is a video by Purple Feather called Change Your Words, Change Your World. And I'll try to find it and put a link in here in a while, but Change Your Words, Change Your World. And it'll show you how to break out some of those old habits and help the other people to do that too. So as you're thinking about doing those things, I want to remind you that when you're trying to change things for people, that some accountability is required, right? And every time you're trying to do this, oh, thank you for putting the video link in there. That was great. Every time you're trying to do this, there's 2 sides to the story. There's my side of the story, and there's your side of the story, and then there's the right story. I was driving to a little town near here not too long ago, and somebody ran into my truck just a little bit, just a teeny bit. And he was in a great big truck. And when I got out, I said, hey, you hit my truck. He's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, yeah, you did. You're touching my bumper. And he got it. He's like, oh my gosh. And then we realized my vehicle was fine and his was fine. And we started to pull away, and he came back and he knocked on my window. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a murderer, and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I will die. That was the story I was telling myself. And he said, hey lady, thanks for not being a bitch about this. That was the story he was telling himself. He was in a big truck. Somebody was going to sue him and get all of his money. He's telling a story. I'm telling a story. Somewhere in the middle is the truth. So when you're working with your people, when you're breaking out of communication issues that you've had over and over, you have to remember there's their story. Ask them what it is. Tell them, how is this working? Tell me how this is playing in your head, and I'll tell you how it's playing in mine, and let's figure out how we can fix that. Then there's their goal. Ask them that. What goal do you have for this? What are you trying to achieve right now? How am I frustrating you? How am I helping you? How could I help you? And then you want to tell them your goal. My goal is to help you be successful. My goal is to get you out of this. My goal is whatever. And then how can we follow up? So I'm going to do this and this. If you'll do this and this, let's follow up in a week. Would that be okay? The follow-up is the part that we skip because we're so scared. But people look for that follow-up, especially youth. Oh my gosh, they're looking for that follow-up. And it's scary to really hold people accountable. I'm going to tell you a story about being scared that I wrote up at Luckick Park. And I don't know if Sue knows this one. So I was running Luckick Park during the pandemic, which meant I got to visit with people sitting around a campfire without a mask on. It wasn't an all bad gig. We didn't get to have camps, but we did have friends and family and volunteers come in. And there were some kids that came in, 19-year-old, with some of her friends who were Vistas, Volunteers in Service to America. And they were telling their stories. And Abby had been out in California in a COVID clinic. They were working 16 hours a day taking care of people in Oakland with COVID, if you can imagine that. And then they came to Luckick Park with 300-year-old trees, towering Douglas fir. They're so beautiful. A field of green, 7 acres of just wondrous glory. One of my young students said, God is everywhere. You can hear him here. So we're sitting around the campfire, and Abby said, well, I was in California. One of my friends invited me to go hiking. Abby, like me, was built for comfort, not for speed. She'd never been hiking before. If you're hiking, what are you scared of? Bears, right? Snakes, sunstroke, getting lost, spiders, all the things. So Abby, who had never been on a dirt trail before, she'd only ever been on sidewalk, is hiking through the woods in California with her friend, and her friend gets ahead of her. And Abby is scared. She is so scared. Most of the time when we're trying to hold people accountable or when we're trying to do something big in the world, we're scared. We're scared because we don't have enough information. We're scared because we're trying to do it alone. Sometimes we're scared just because we like to be scared. I'm scared, I don't have to do it. So Abby is walking along and she's scared. She's just all revved up. Have you guys felt that anxiety where you're just scared? You don't know what's going to happen? Abby looked to the right and there were bears in the field. Holy cow. She is so scared. She sat down on a stump and she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to move forward. She didn't know how she was going to survive this. And Abby just sat there on that stump. Now, I mentioned earlier, we lived in Alaska for 25 years. My husband took what we call the fall with Jesus. That's another lecture for another day, but he was hanging a crucifix. He fell, he died. The Jesus broke off the crucifix. It was in my husband's arms. My husband is still alive today. There's a story. But when he was in ICU, all of his friends came in and they started telling me the stories about what this man had been doing out in the woods. I'm like, oh, really? And so I wrote a book about it. It's called Seasoned, and it tells his story. Not once did any one of those big, tough men just sit down to figure out how to face a bear. And that's what this little girl did. He just thought, I'm just going to be here. And it's going to be the end. She said, I don't know if I prayed. I just sat there quietly. Have you guys been that scared where you just sit there? You can't do anything? Abby's friend came back. And she said, Abby, what are you doing? And Abby said, the bears, they're going to eat us. And her friend looked to the right and she said, oh, Abby, those are just cows. Oh my gosh, you guys, they were just cows. The thing that you're scared of is going to swish its tail. It's going to say moo. It is just a cow. The fear keeps you safe, but it also gives you reason to call in God and say, walk with me here. It's just a cow. So these things that you're scared of, you can handle it. Go take them on. I am so glad I got to talk to you today. Thank you 1,000% for this, Sue. I loved it so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. It was really, really fun to see you again and be part of this and have you be part of this and meet all of these fantastic people.
Yes, amazing people. I'm so excited to have you guys in my world now.
Yeah, and you and ours. We're
Yeah, thank
sending
you.
information about your Monday morning stuff and, some of those connections out to people so they'll have them and can follow
Great,
up.
great, great.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep,
I saw that
that's
happening. So
refreshing.
thank you. And I'm going to read your comments now, your chats, you guys, but thank you for this time. If anybody has a question, just pop me an email. I'm going on mute, which is hard for me to do.
Okay.
I
All
popped
right.
one in the chat and I said, sometimes the scared to death actually ends with the death of a family member or friend. Talk about it is not the end. It is in circumstances like that.
Yeah, Kathryn, isn't that so true? I think I've grown my very most when that has happened, when there's been a death and we are scared to death. And that is the moment where we have to call in our community and say, hold my hand, surround me here. And it's when we have to know that God walks with us in those moments. It's so hard. It is scary.
And that's something that most of us do face sooner or later in our lives. Yeah. But that's
it's one of the blessings of love, right? If we don't get to say goodbye to a loved one, we never had love, but it's hard.
Yeah. Yep. And thank you again.
I really like what Karen said about calling your community. We in my church family, we have a woman who's dealing with some struggles with her husband's health, and she agreed. She said, "Put out a prayer. We have a prayer chain for our church family. Ask for prayers. Tell them what's going on." She's been very transparent, and the love that's come back in reply all messages to her has been so overwhelming. And really good advice from other women who have had similar challenges. And it's just that she's felt the love and she's felt the encouragement from that practical wisdom that other people in the church family were willing to share. So calling in your community is everything.
It is. And those of you who were here last week remember what I said about the church in Cheyenne coming around our family when we lost a daughter. And we were so afraid for her because she was into such a scary situation, and we wouldn't have made it through without them stepping up and really being the body of Christ, that healing and that support and that love and feeding us in all kinds of ways. We're going to take a little look at Mother Teresa and her engagement with people in all kinds of ways, and some good words of wisdom for her to hold on to. Every time you smile at someone, it's a gift to that person. Some enter your life as blessings and others as lessons. If we want to love, we must learn how to forgive. God didn't call me to be successful. He called me to be faithful. If you can't feed 100 people, then feed one. And if you judge people, then you have no time to love them. And if you want to change the world, love your family. And that one especially applies to our course today. And then spread love everywhere you go. And peace begins with a smile. So we had to look, because those pictures don't particularly have her smiling. I said, Belinda, we've got to find a picture of her with a smile. So on the right-hand side, you've got the picture of her smiling. And a little note about her being canonized by the Catholic Church as St. Teresa of Calcutta, for the way that she just kept lifting up people one at a time and helping them, standing with them, helping them get their feet under them, and sometimes helping them die too, but just present as a steady sense of God's love at work in the world. And we're going to show another little thing from Jack Hartmann again, and a music video that we found that we just seem to kind of speak to this whole thing too.
Jack Hartmann, Kids Music Channel.
Now for our closing prayer and blessing. And again, I would invite you to pray with me, and we'll still have a few words after the end of this and announcements sort of things, and then a concluding music too. So keep it on until after you get all those announcements. You know how important they are. Please pray with me. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness in the world. All things will break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as is said, but with attention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is in you. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. May you indeed find peace in this anxious world. May God bless you and keep you safe until we meet again. Amen.
Well, thank you so much to Sue and to Karen blessing us today. It's been a remarkable session, and I would like us to perhaps show a bit of appreciation and gratitude to them because they are so special. So I'm going to count to 3, and even though we're muted, I want you, after I count to 3, either give them a big clap or a big heart or a big yay or anything like that, just to show our gratitude and appreciation for them today and just what a blessing they have been as a part of our session. All right, are we ready to go? Got your thing ready to go? So it's 1, 2, 3. Yay! Awesome. We thank you so much for being with us today. There was so much content today that I know is going to bless us this week as we think about how to manage all the things that are before us. And so we praise God for that. And I have a few announcements. I would like us, we talked a lot about leadership today, and I'd like some of you to think about leadership as part of Mission U. We have a couple of places on our Mission U planning team to represent the Conference of the Mountain Sky. And we also are looking in the next quadrennium for an assistant dean and a dean. The dean should come from the conference, and our assistant dean should come from the ranks of United Women in Faith. So I plant that thought and hope that some of you will pray about that. And then we have some great things coming up that we can take part of. Greening your church, share and learn together is a webinar coming up on Sunday, March 3rd, hosted by the Mountain Sky Conference Creation Justice Task Force. That task force is amazing in the kinds of resources they have. And if you haven't gone to the website and looked under the creation resources, I encourage you to do so. And I know that this webinar is going to be very helpful to many of our churches. Now, you know, the registration for this study continues to be open, and I'd like you to think about encouraging your friends who can go and look at the recordings. And, you know, when we send the email out, we'll have the place on YouTube where people can go see those recordings. And so if you think it's good enough that you really got to talk someone into taking it, they can catch up and still participate and even get a certificate if they would choose to do that. Then another exciting announcement we have is our Hybrid Mission U study. It'll be the first live study that we would have had since 2020. And it will be on Saturday, June 8th, Ogden First United Methodist Church, Marriott, Slaterville City, Utah. There's a lot of details yet to be worked out, but I hope you'll save the date if this is something you can attend. And we're really working hard to make it a hybrid event as well. So save that date, June 8th. And finally, we have our closing music. Again, it's been a wonderful study today. Thanks for blessing us, Karen and Sue. The music is Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. When it concludes, you will be dismissed for today. Thank you so much, and God bless.